He also said, "This is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground, night and day. Whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself the soil produces grain, first the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it because the harvest has come." Again he said, "What shall we say the kingdom of God is like, or what parable shall we use to describe it? It is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds on earth. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that the birds can perch in its shade." With many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them as much as they could understand. He did not say anything to them without using a parable, but when he was alone with his own disciples, he explained everything. Mark 4, verse 26 to 34. I'm going to break down this powerful message from Mark 4, verse 26 to 34, in a way that's relatable and easy to understand, so you can apply it to your life today. In Mark 4, verse 26 to 34, we find two incredible parables that reveal the powerful message of God's kingdom. These parables are not just ancient stories, but vibrant illustrations of God's character and his plan for our lives. The parable of the growing seed and the mustard seed are more than just agricultural analogies. They hold the secrets to understanding our faith and growth. You see, Jesus didn't just teach in abstractions. He taught in stories that spoke to the hearts of people. And these two parables are no exception. They're not just interesting anecdotes. They're portals into the very nature of God's kingdom. So let's dive in and explore what these parables can teach us about God's powerful message. The parable of the growing seed tells us that faith is not something we can manufacture or control. It's not about our efforts or our programs, but about the supernatural work of God. And the parable of the mustard seed reveals that God's kingdom is not about grandeur or human success, but about humility and obscurity. These parables are not just descriptive, they're prescriptive. They show us how to live out our faith in a way that honors God. As we dive into these parables, I want you to ask yourself, what does my faith look like right now? Is it dry and withered, or is it growing and flourishing? Am I trying to control my spiritual journey, or am I surrendering to the supernatural work of God? These parables challenge our understanding of faith and growth, and they invite us to re-examine our assumptions about God's kingdom. Let's take a closer look at the parable of the growing seed. Jesus says, "The kingdom of God is like this. A man scatters seeds on the ground, and as he sleeps, the seed sprouts and grows, but he doesn't know how." This parable is not just about the power of seed planting. It's about the power of God to bring life and growth to our lives, often when we're not even aware of it. Jesus is saying that God's kingdom is not a human enterprise. It's a divine reality that operates on its own timetable. We can't manufacture spiritual growth or dictate how God works, but what we can do is create an environment where God's kingdom can flourish. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next few paragraphs. The parable of the mustard seed tells us that God's kingdom is not about grandeur or human success. It's about humility and obscurity. Jesus says, "The kingdom of God is like this. A mustard seed, which is the smallest of seeds, but when it's planted, it grows into a tree so large that birds can nest in its branches." This parable is not just about the power of small beginnings. It's about the power of God to take our smallest, most insignificant lives and turn them into something glorious. When we read these parables, we're forced to confront our own expectations of faith and growth. We're forced to ask ourselves, am I looking for a spectacular display of God's power? Or am I willing to trust in His quiet, behind-the-scenes work? These parables challenge our assumptions about God's kingdom and invite us to re-examine our understanding of faith and growth. One of the things that strikes me about these parables is how they subvert our expectations of spiritual growth. We often think that spiritual growth is about striving and struggling, about pushing ourselves to be better and do more. But these parables say that growth is not something we can manufacture. It's something that God brings about in His own time and in His own way. This can be challenging for us, especially when we're not seeing the growth or progress we want in our lives. We start to feel like we're not doing enough, or that God is not doing enough. But these parables remind us that growth is not about our efforts. It's about God's supernatural work in our lives. I think one of the biggest struggles we face as Christians is the struggle to trust in God's sovereignty. We want to control our lives. We want to dictate how God works. But these parables remind us that God is the one who is ultimately in control. He's the one who brings about growth and transformation, often when we're not even aware of it. So how do we apply these parables to our lives? How do we trust in God's sovereignty when we're not seeing the growth or progress we want? One of the things we can do is surrender our expectations and our timelines to God. We can stop trying to control our spiritual journeys and start trusting in God's supernatural work in our lives. Another thing we can do is focus on creating an environment where God's kingdom can flourish. This might mean simplifying our lives or seeking accountability from others, or just taking time to rest and pray. Whatever it looks like, the key is to create space for God to work in our lives. As we reflect on these parables, I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to trust in God's sovereignty? What does it mean for you to surrender your expectations and timelines to God? These are not just theoretical questions, they're practical invitations to live out our faith in a way that honors God. One of the most surprising things about these parables is how they defy our human expectations. We expect God to work in certain ways, to bring about growth and transformation in our lives according to our own timelines. But these parables say that God works in unexpected ways, often in the most unexpected places. The parable of the growing seed tells us that God works silently behind the scenes, bringing about growth and transformation when we're not even aware of it. And the parable of the mustard seed tells us that God takes our smallest, most insignificant lives and turns them into something glorious. These parables are not just descriptive, they're prescriptive. They show us how to live out our faith in a way that honors God. As we reflect on these parables, I want to ask you, what are your expectations of faith and growth right now? Are you expecting God to work in certain ways, or are you open to His surprising nature? These parables invite us to re-examine our assumptions about God's kingdom and to trust in His sovereignty, even when we don't understand how He's working. One of the things that I love about these parables is how they're both comforting and challenging at the same time. On the one hand, they remind us that God is in control, that He's working behind the scenes to bring about growth and transformation in our lives. But on the other hand, they challenge us to surrender our expectations and timelines to God, to trust in His sovereignty, even when we don't understand how He's working. As we apply these parables to our lives, I want to encourage you to focus on the comfort and the challenge. Focus on the comfort of knowing that God is in control, that He's working behind the scenes to bring about growth and transformation in your life. But also focus on the challenge of surrendering your expectations and timelines to God, of trusting in His sovereignty even when you don't understand how He's working. One of the most impactful revelations from these parables is the surprising nature of God's work. God doesn't work according to our expectations or timelines. He works in unexpected ways, often in the most unexpected places. This can be both comforting and challenging, but ultimately, it's a reminder that God is the one who is in control. As we reflect on these parables, I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to trust in the surprising nature of God's work? What does it mean for you to surrender your expectations and timelines to God, even when you're not sure how He's working? These are not just theoretical questions. They're practical invitations to live out your faith in a way that honors God. In the end, the parables of the growing seed and the mustard seed are not just interesting stories. They're powerful reminders of God's sovereignty and His surprising nature. They invite us to re-examine our assumptions about faith and growth, to surrender our expectations and timelines to God, and to trust in His supernatural work in our lives. So, what are the key takeaways from our exploration of these parables? Firstly, God's kingdom is not about human success or grandeur. It's about humility and obscurity. Secondly, faith is not something we can manufacture or control. It's about the supernatural work of God. And thirdly, God's work is often surprising and unexpected, defying our human expectations. As we summarize the key takeaways from our discussion, I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to apply these parables to your life? What does it mean for you to trust in God's sovereignty, to surrender your expectations and timelines to God, and to focus on creating an environment where God's kingdom can flourish? Finally, I want to encourage you to share your thoughts on this powerful message from Mark 4, verse 26 to 34 in the comments below. What did you find most challenging or comforting about these parables? How are you going to apply them to your life today? I invite you to please like this video, share to those who might need to see this, and subscribe. Lastly, don't forget to check out another video exploring similar themes where we'll dive deeper into the power of God's kingdom. God bless you, and see you again tomorrow for our daily gospel reflection.
I appreciate you taking the time to watch and be here. If this video resonated with you or touched your heart, please consider supporting the channel by buying me a coffee. Simply scan the QR code or click the link in the description below. Your generosity keeps this mission alive. See you soon. God bless. If you're looking to overcome depression and anxiety by strengthening your spirituality, I invite you to check out my ebook, Soulful Transformations, Bridging Faith and Mind for Lasting Wellness, available on Kindle. This book combines cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, with biblical wisdom to help you manage stress, tackle anxiety, and find lasting peace through faith. It's not just about mental health. It's about deepening your relationship with God and transforming your life in ways that inspire others. Check the description below for the link and take the first step toward a life of spiritual and emotional wellness.